4 million years ago on the planet Earth, two brothers decided to watch Transformers media, and now they are going to make it your problem. Hi, I'm Hayden.
Hi, and I'm Frankie.
And today we are doing a off-the-cuff, no notes, no in-depth build-up or anything, reaction to the most recent Transformers movie to have come out at the time of this recording. Transformers 1.
Yes, indeed. We will save our usual in-depth analysis for when we get to it in our marathon, but for now we're just going to give our overall thoughts on it. We'll do a spoiler-free section, and then we will warn you when we start talking spoilers.
It's like close creep into spoilers.
Yeah,
but,
yeah.
I think just like off the bat.
Yeah.
Like, how would you say? Would you say best movie ever or worst movie ever?
Oh my goodness. Is that all I have to choose from?
Sure.
If I'm gonna... Okay, if I only have those two choices.
Yeah.
Mr. Sunday Movies.
It's effective.
I'll have to give it best movie ever.
Me too.
Yeah. I'm not saying it is the best movie ever, but out of those two choices, I'm going to say it's the best movie ever.
As far as like, yeah.
Just... What would you out of 10? What would you rate it on a scale of Transformers media, and then on a scale of movie media?
Okay. So as a piece, I'll do the movie one first. So as a movie, just by itself as a movie, I'd rate it an 8 or a 9 out of 10.
Nice.
Mainly because of like the later half of the movie. The first half is pretty good, but it just kind of like escalates as the movie goes on, and makes for a very enjoyable watch. If it's obviously not like on the level of like. Well, not obviously, but like I don't think it's on the artistic level of something like Spider-Verse, or some of those like Puss in Boots: The Last Wish movies that I feel like kind of move past being just a kids movie sort of thing, and edge closer to like they're actually doing something really, really significant with their story and themes and presentation and everything. But that being said, I think Transformers 1 is visually stunning. Story-wise, fantastic. And pacing-wise, pretty good. But as a piece of Transformers media, I'd actually say it's probably an... weirdly enough, I think it's closer to like an 8 out of 10.
Interesting. Yeah. Why would you say that?
For a lot of different reasons, but and this will kind of pop up in spoilers as well, but it's mainly like the presentation of Cybertron and Cybertronian culture feels very different and very new, which isn't a bad thing. The way it's presented feels different from most Transformers presentation, and again in a good way, but there's some elements to it that feel I heard somebody once put it that it feels like a Bionicle movie with the skin of a Transformers movie. And it's an assessment that I disregarded going into it, but after watching it I was like, I kind of feel that, but that's not a bad thing. So
yeah, so would you say that the first thing that pops into my head for Bionicle would, of course, be Year One, Madanui online game, the first novel,
yes.
Stuff like that. And then the second thing that pops in my head is Mask of Light, right? And on that, I'd say, no, it's nothing like a Bionicle movie.
No.
Then I remembered Bionicle 2, Legends of Metro Nui,
Bionicle
and I'm
2,
like...
Legends of Metro Nui.
Yeah, it's kind of that movie.
This movie has a lot of similarities.
Yeah. It's not it's not close enough to where saying that is a spoiler, But yeah, there is a lot of similarities that, yeah, I can see where, if you've seen Bionicle 2, Legends of Metro Nui, you have a similar plot structure, but it's different than, it's different enough from that. And I think that comes from sort of the zeitgeist, the monomyth, the cultural unconscious, or collective unconscious storytelling techniques and structures that work.
Yeah, where it's like, these are the beats that work. Like,
yeah. So you're going to put those together in a way, that is going to end up being similar, but always, with your own spin on it.
Right.
To other things that have come before, So it's not plagiarizing Bionicle in any way. It is definitely its own thing, and it is a good thing. And we'll also, in the spoiler section, talk more about how it draws a lot from other Transformers media, specifically the aligned continuity. But with that in mind,
what is your rating?
Okay, I'll get back to that in a second. I was gonna. You've ruined my segue.
My bad.
What continuity do you think this fits in, if at all?
If at all, there's like certain specific things that, like, it's more visual signposts than anything else that show up in this that lead me to think something closer to Prime, and aligned continuity. But then again, everything was trying to be in the aligned continuity, whether or not it actually worked or not.
The most misaligned continuity.
Exactly. The much maligned continuity.
Not that the stuff in it was bad, just that the alignment, trying to put all these different things that didn't really care about continuity as much as they made you think they cared about continuity.
There's a lot of visual signposts that point towards War for Cybertron, Transformers Prime, but specifically with the way that the 13 are portrayed, and also specifically Megatron's canon is almost a one-to-one of the War for Cybertron canon that he has in those games, with like the triple barrel thing.
Yeah.
But
okay, yeah.
If I had to take a wild stab at anything, if it was gonna line up with any continuity, it'd be Aligned, just because that one is the most receptive to they'll take anybody.
I actually feel like, and I'm going to work backwards into my rating since I didn't talk about it. I feel like this is its own continuity.
I do too.
Because it's different enough. It definitely draws on lore from the aligned continuity, specifically Optimus and Megatron's backstory in Transformers Prime, but is so much different enough from it that it's its own thing from that. Now, the aligned continuity was also highly inspired by the live-action continuity, and being that this is a theatrical film, it could fit into the horribly discontinuous live-action continuity.
Oh,
right?
Gosh, I didn't even think about that.
Yeah, because there is no continuity in the live-action continuity. Let's just face it. There's a continuity, but it don't make sense.
It is. It's just that they change it halfway through.
Yeah. Halfway through the movie sometimes.
Yeah.
So it could fit into that as well. I don't know enough about Earthspark or Cyberverse or any of that stuff to say if it fits in continuity with any of those. But I'm going to say that because it has similarities to so many different continuities, but not nailed down to one specific one, that it's its own continuity.
Okay.
So we could maybe, theoretically, like, in the future, I know they've talked about doing, like, a trilogy.
Yes.
So, after Transformers 1, we might get Transformers 2.
Spelled TWO.
Yeah, and then Transformers 3.
Spelled THREE.
No, it's going to be in a different language each time. So it's Transformers 1, Transformers DOS, Transformers...
What do you think is the actual naming convention
Triad.
behind that?
I don't know.
Like, why specifically the one, like, as a word?
don't think they ever got in. It may be a reference to All Are One, Till All Are One, and now here All Are One. But this film kind of more shows like the division of one into many.
Well, true, but I also see it as my brain instantly went to the Godzilla -1 naming convention.
Yeah, where it's saying this is a prequel by saying
this is a prequel. This is one. This is the starting point.
Right.
Like this is the fresh, clean start. So.
How would you say it works as like an entry point for new Transformer fan to introduce? If you were going to introduce somebody to Transformers, would you use this as an introduction?
I would use this as an introduction, mostly based off of if they have a general knowledge of what Transformers is. I'm not sure if this would be the best one for a complete blind, like, I've never heard of Transformers. As long as you have the caveat of every Transformers is different from the last one.
Yeah.
Then I think it's a really solid entry point, because it gives you most of the mythos of, like, the pre-Earth mythos kind of condensed into a single digestible pill. Where it's like, there's some areas where it probably could have been fleshed out a little bit more, or fleshed out less.
Yeah.
But that's just the nature of the adaptation. Like, it's going to focus on some things more and some things less, because they're doing their own thing. They're doing a unique thing. So
right. Yeah, I would agree with that. It's close enough to so many different things that I would say that, yeah, this is a good jumping on point for a lot of people, but it's also, in a way, kind of like... Because I used to be, like, super into, like, oh, you got to see the original first, you know? You got to see G1, and then you got to see Prime, and then you got to see, you know, and that's just too much homework for somebody these days, right?
Really,
you know?
is.
And it's like, but see, this is cool because of what happened in, you remember Armada? You got to watch Armada, but Armada's only good if you make it all the way to the end of Cybertron, and, like, you know, but Cybertron's good because you got to watch Beast Wars first, and no. You know, okay, that's a little, yeah. I used to be that way a lot. So it would irk me when people were being brought in on animated, which is so different than what it is. But at the core, it is the same as, you know, G1 and Armada.
Again,
and
you
stuff
have
like
to
that,
ask,
you know?
like...
So for this, if you asked me 20 years ago, I would have been like, really torn on whether this was a good jumping in point, or if this was or if, you know, oh, you got to go back and watch the original. You know, now I say this is actually a good jumping on point for people, because the one thing, and they do kind of get this through the characters themselves, the sense of wonder that you've talked in some of our previous episodes, that the humans provide this connection point for the Transformers to have this, like, sense of wonder.
Yes.
In the show, and, you know, for humans being like, wow, transforming robots, you know?
Right.
And for the robots to say, wow, Earth is beautiful, you know? The Autobots specifically.
Exactly.
You know? And then to give that threat level of...
people are squishy.
Give that threat level to the Decepticons of these things are these, like, giant, you know, inescapable threats and stuff like that. But I feel like what we get in the trade-off for this movie is that the characterization of the main characters of the film is such that we get that sense of wonder through them.
Yes.
Which really fleshes out the characters and makes them more human than they would normally be, where they grow to be more, you know, the Autobots grow to be more human. Or in the live action movies where the Decepticons are just like these metal monsters that show up to terrorize and blow up things, you know. Animated does a good job of, you know, really humanizing the Autobots. But it is different, you know, so it's weird as a jumping on point, but it's also a really great jumping on point because you really get that character,
right?
You know,
and
so this movie, I feel like, yeah, if you were just going to take somebody who doesn't know a lot about Transformers to a Transformers film, this is a good one for you to go see. Because, like, some of the live action movies, it's like, if you were to go see it, you know, the 2007 one, okay, you get the gist of Transformers. If you go to any of the other Michael Bay ones, it's like, what? You know? And then the Bumblebee movie is like, okay, cool, but it's kind of a throwback to 80s movies and, you know, is inundated with references. But it is a good standalone movie, but you don't get the full experience of Transformers through it, you know. And it's a character piece.
It brings up the question of what makes a Transformers movie identify as a Transformers movie. Like, what are the core elements that make you feel this is a Transformers movie? And it goes back to our rating of, like, as a piece of Transformers media, how would you rate this? Instead of as a movie, how would you rate this? Because I would say that the 2007 Transformers movie is a jumping on point for Transformers. I'd say it's a very entertaining movie. But maybe not for the reasons that you'd think. But
now, I will say, the CGI in that movie has held up against everything.
Precisely. And,
the effects in that film have not been outdone.
But if you think about it, like, the 80s Transformers movie even was like, that's relying on you having watched all of the show.
Yes,
going up to it.
That was a point I was building up to, is the 80s Transformers movie is not a good jumping on point for people if you haven't at least made them do a little bit of homework and watched a few of the G1 episodes.
Yes.
Because they're not going to get, you know, spoiler alerts for the 80s movie. They're not going to get emotional when Optimus dies, if, you know, because he just shows up and then gets killed, basically. He has an epic fight, but, you know. You do get the sense of, oh, this is their great leader, and then, you know, it is sad when he dies, but it's not that same connection if you haven't watched season 1 and 2, you know?
Right.
Whereas here, because we're with Optimus from the beginning, you connect with these characters, and they're very humanized throughout the movie, right?
Yes.
Transformers, the 86 movie, is a great movie if you know what Transformers is.
Right.
But if you're just watching this movie in isolation, if you're just going to sit down in isolation and watch a Transformers movie, this is a pretty good one. Transformers 1 is a pretty good movie to watch in isolation.
The progression of movies that we've gotten about the Transformers. 80s movie is relying on you to have continuity. 2007 is a good jumping on point for the general concept of live action Transformers. Of, like, this is how a 30-foot tall robot that turns into a car would interact with the world, not really as how these characters would interact with the world.
It's the closest we get to consistent scale.
Yes.
In Transformers.
But it gives you that sense of scale and awe and wonder at the mere idea of giant robots that turn into vehicles.
Yeah.
The further movies kind of go into summer blockbuster territory, which is fine. And then you get Bumblebee, again, throwback piece.
Really character
more
specific.
of, like, super isolated.
Yeah.
Doesn't really raise a lot of, like, things about, like, what is the mythos, what is the themes of Transformers.
But it's a good, like, character.
Yeah, it's a good little, like, one-off adventure.
Yeah.
Rise of the Beasts, on paper, is everything that a Transformers fan wanted. Transformers interacting with each other as characters during the daytime.
Yeah.
But it was so much, so fast, and so late.
Yeah.
That it just felt like too much too late sort of thing. And we'll go more into depth on that in the future, but Transformers 1 feels different from most of the adaptations that we've gotten in that it is strictly new for the most part. It still pulls from a lot, but everything about its execution and presentation is stuff that we really haven't seen before in a Transformers movie.
Yeah.
And mainly because of its focus on characters.
Yeah.
But also in different ways as well. Why I think it's one of the best jumping on points is because it is reference heavy, but not in a egregious way. Is that most of the references and, like, quote unquote fan service is extremely in the background or mostly just in service to the story itself. The closest I think we got was a slow-mo shot of Optimus using a rifle in a frame recreation
Oh yeah,
of his entrance in the 80s movie.
right.
And that was the only one that I could really pinpoint as being like, this is really egregious, but in a good way. But
Yeah. Yeah, that is a good point. Let me, now that I've lost my segue, let me go ahead and give my rating, and then we'll talk more on that
Yes.
subject. Yeah, so as a Transformers film, I'd actually give this a 9 out of 10.
Okay.
Because I think it is such a good piece in isolation. Like, if you're going to just sit down in one Transformer thing with a group of people that, want to know more about Transformers but don't want to, watch the entirety of Generation 1 or something like that, it's good for longtime fans because there's lots of references you can get, but those references don't overtake it.
Yes.
It's not just, oh, look at this reference. Oh, look at this reference. Oh, look at this reference, like we get in so many movies these days.
Exactly.
Like that scene in Stranger Things where he starts talking about New Coke.
Yes.
He literally just recites the commercial for New Coke. What is wrong with you people? Anyway,
there's a lot of movies that pull off that reference, that horrible reference of, I know what that thing is.
Yeah. This movie does not do that. In a lot of the trailers, we were concerned about, they were pushing a lot of the, like, kiddish...
They marketed it like it was an Illumination movie.
Right. There was a lot of, like, kind of contemporary internet-type humor in a lot of kids' films that we see nowadays.
Yeah. A bit of the Marvel
that
just happened.
Yeah, that kind of made us a little worried about the tone of this film. Do not worry, be not afraid.
Yes,
I bring you tidings of good joy. What you see in the commercials is basically all that there is in the film. There's
Pretty
a
much.
little bit more of that kind of humor, but for the most part, when it's used, it's not offensive in any way.
Yeah.
It's not like there is one part that I want to talk about that is very confusing to me that we'll talk about in the spoilers, but overall the cringy humor is so spread out as to, like, it's not all piled into one bit, right? So it's just here and there once in a while, and it's not going to ruin your experience at all. And furthermore, I also want to say while it gets dark, it does get dark. It never gets so dark and serious as to be cringy in the opposite direction, because that's the problem I had with the Netflix Transformers War for Cybertron series and the Machinima series, was that it was trying to be so dark and serious that it just was laughable. It was funny for the wrong reason,
Yeah.
This movie does not do that. When it's dark, it is with good reason, and it is played very well. And when it is, but it has a good counterbalance of light. The best I can say, the best comparison I can draw would be something like G1, or the darker parts. The more serious and grounded episodes of G1, or the some of the better episodes of Transformers Prime,
Yes.
like where it
not really
it takes itself serious enough to tell a good story, but it's not so serious that it gets cringy, and it doesn't take itself too seriously to where it becomes obnoxious, and it doesn't get so obnoxious with, like, because there's a lot of movies that they're like, you can tell they were embarrassed to be making this sort of thing,
yes.
right? But this was definitely made by people who love the franchise.
You can tell that there's a lot of passion going into this movie.
Yeah.
And a lot of genuine love for the franchise that isn't rooted in, like, well, we're doing this for the fans sort of thing.
Yeah.
It was more of just a desire to tell a story set within the confines of a Transformers movie and setting, and being inspired by the things and themes that make up Transformers media.
Right. There's even a dedication to the CEO of Hasbro, who passed away a few years ago, basically for continuing to let there be more Transformers.
Yeah.
At the end in the credits.
Like, again, at the end of the day, it is to sell toys, but again, you don't have to consistently refresh the toys that you're selling with new stuff that is contributing to more stories set in that sort of mythos and everything. We've seen it time and time again with all of the nostalgia marketing and stuff that you can just sell the same toy over and over again.
Yeah.
And people will buy it.
Yeah.
But
well, this year we put a 12 on the box.
Yeah. But with Transformers 1, it seems like, okay, this feels genuine.
Yeah. There's none of that, like, meta, what do you call it? Like, I almost said nihilism. That's not it. The,
Self-aware?
No. Cynical self-awareness.
Yes.
Cynical meta stuff going on. Like, if there is any meta-textual commentary, it's more in the vein of something like Spider-Verse, where they use that to tell the story better.
Yeah.
Right? And it is very focused on telling the story. It's never pointing at itself and saying, haha, isn't that funny, we're making a movie about toys. You know, it sticks to the story, you know, and it sticks to telling a good story.
So did you want to walk through the story?
I never said as a movie, though, I'm gonna rate it a little lower. I'd say 7 or 8 out of 10. No, nothing lower than that. Nothing lower than 7. 7 or 8 out of 10, just because I've never felt more like my dad watching a movie before. You know how he used to always say, "Oh, I couldn't," you know, he always loves CGI or animated films that have lots of detail and lots of color. And there is so much detail. The graphical fidelity of this film is fantastic, but it's so fast that I can't tell what's going on sometimes. And then when the in the credits it said like executive producer Michael Bay, I was like, oh well, that explains it. You know? There is a lot of scenes where it's like, what is happening? I can't. There's so much I want to see because it looks so beautiful. There are parts where they slow down, but in the action scenes, like I always say, Transformers the movie, the 1986 movie, it moves at a mile per second, right? Yes. You know, like that movie's pacing is really fast, but I can tell what's going on because of the way that the shots are composed and stuff like that. This movie gets a lot more chaotic in its action sequences, and while it does slow down a few times, the pacing is very quick. I would have preferred like it to slow down a little bit more in like I'd say in the second act it has good pacing, but in the first and the third act it's very quick.
Yes, I think there's a point.
Then there's like a lot of action scenes where I wish I could take in all the detail and see what's going on, but there's a lot of chaos going on, so I never get to really. If I were to watch it at like 0.25 speed, then I could like pick out some more little reference Easter eggs in the background and stuff like that.
I think on a rewatch it would be a lot easier to comprehend most of the action sequences. Mainly just because it's like experiencing it for the first time sort of thing. I do think this movie really, really shines when it takes the time to slow down. Because there's a couple sequences towards the middle, and again it's like it hits that like middle first half of the movie, and so many different scenes from that point onward just start getting better and better and better every time that they slow down. And then that's when the action feels like it's actually there to justify the spaces in between those slow moments. And not saying that they're like, you know, oh, it's slow or anything. It's like, no, it's just a quiet scene. Right.
We could go into a whole discussion about Ghibli movies and the concept of mob, but there's other videos on YouTube you can watch about that, and we're already getting kind of long in the tooth with this review that was supposed to be 20 minutes. I'm sure we've passed 20 minutes by now.
Exactly.
But yeah, going back to something you said earlier, I think that it hits this perfect in-between point where it's not just for like adults on a nostalgia trip, and it's not just for kids either. This is the good, and it's kind of talking about Ghibli also. It's that good kind of kid movie where you can enjoy it all your life long, and you'll get different things out of it at different points of your life.
Yes.
Because we had some kids sitting behind us that were just busting up laughing. They were having a great time.
It's a beautiful thing to hear.
We had some older people in there that were having a great time. We were having a great time.
Again, like, even going back
my
to...
wife said that was fun at the end of it. That was a fun movie.
It genuinely is. It's a fun, entertaining, breezy watch.
Yeah.
And it doesn't wear out its welcome. It doesn't it doesn't go too soon. Sort of thing. Like, I feel like it's a good balance of, and it ends pretty, not conclusively, but ends in a way that feels complete without it. There's still obviously room for sequels and everything like that, but it ends fairly completely.
Yeah, like we said, except for like one plot detail, overall it ends in such a way that if they don't make any more, it's fine. You can go from this movie and start watching one of the other shows, right?
Exactly.
But if they do make more movies, great. That would be awesome.
Right.
And there's still a lot of stuff that they can do with this this vision of Cybertron.
Yes, I will say the vision of Cybertron is really unique in a good way.
Yes.
Like, I love when they do something distinct from cold metal gray planet.
Yeah. Definitely, and this isn't a spoiler because it's in all the trailers, definitely the most like organic life we've seen on Cybertron.
Yes.
And it raises some very interesting questions that I'll be very interested to get into when we do our deep dive eventually in 80 years. But real quick, lightning round. I'm going to ask you, we're going to give our brief thoughts on how we think that they treated the characters in here.
Yes.
And no spoilers. We're just going to give brief thoughts on them, and then we'll talk more about plot details when we get into our spoiler section.
So...
Optimus Prime.
Or
Orion Pax for most of the movie.
Yeah, I will go off of visuals, performance, and character.
Okay.
So visually, a pretty standard Orion Pax. Like, he has the lighter frame and everything.
Yeah.
And there's some of the characters have the it's not really a spoiler, but they get their transformation cog.
Yeah.
And they kind of like go a character design change that like beefs them up and gives them an alternate form. Optimus and Megatron have technically 3 that they go through where they kind of get bigger over the course of the movie.
Yeah. I actually really like that detail. That and the things that they did with the eyes really helped us visually, a good way to visually track character progression.
Yes.
Also, I not really a spoiler, but something we'll probably talk about later. I was thinking about halfway through the movie, what is the point of this being a Transformers movie? The storyline. How does being able to transform relate? Because it's not until about halfway through that they are able to, right? But then it started to click where, it's part of the main theme of this movie that they're able to transform. And I thought that they did really well in integrating the idea of transforming your life into the film with the ability to transform your form as well, right? So it justified the concept as part of the themes of the movie.
Yes, and I think that's what really makes it a good piece of Transformers media is that transformation is at the heart of the movie.
Yeah, because sometimes you get some Transformers media where they spend like 90% of the episode or film or whatever in their robot mode, and it's like, are they ever going to transform?
Yeah. And even though you don't see that much transformation throughout this movie, it's still vitally important when it does happen. But on Orion Pax, visually...
Sorry, one more non-spoilery thing. The fights, I got what I wanted. They really integrated transformation into the fights.
Yes.
being able to do alt mode stuff in the fights. That was fantastic.
Exactly.
All right,
Huge
Orion
fan of that.
Pax. Let's
Orion
talk about
Pax.
Orion Pax. Visually, how did you like him?
Visually, he has a sleeker design in the earlier phases of the movie that I think works really well for him. And as he goes on, he gets like bulkier without losing that. By the end of the movie, visually he was close to classic Prime.
Right.
But I don't think he really completely hit the mark of feeling like Prime. It was only when the face visor was on him.
Yeah. Optimus and Megatron, I think that the movie ends in a very interesting place where they still don't, while they have become Optimus and Megatron, they do not feel like they are complete yet. I feel like there's still room for more development to get them to full Optimus and full Megatron.
Exactly. Yeah. But visually stunning. Again, the eyes of almost all of the characters are very visually interesting in that they are intricate without but still maintaining an abstract version of, they look like a cross between the G1 eyes and the Transformers Prime eyes.
Yeah.
Which I thought was a very stylistically good choice.
What do you think about the faces? Because that was a kind of a big issue when the trailers dropped.
The nose, everything about the faces was fine. The noses took me a little bit, like 15 minutes to get used to, and then I just didn't even really think about them. I think they nailed a good balance with them.
Yeah. It's one of those things where when you see it in a vacuum, the faces are kind of off-putting, a little bit of uncanny valley, but when you're actually watching the movie, you get used to it very quick.
A lot of this movie, visually as a whole, in motion, looks way better than any still frames.
Oh, yes. Absolutely.
But performance-wise, Chris Hemsworth, I figured, well, the more that I listen to his voice as the movie goes on, the more it'll feel like, okay, this is a performance of Optimus Prime. I think if he just went with his normal voice and focused more on putting the gravitas, especially towards the later half of the movie, he really does a good job at pulling off the kind of like idealistic bravado that he has in the beginning of the movie.
Yeah.
Very well, and that kind of like, hey, sort of thing.
Yeah, I think that he works very. I think that his performance is kind of weird in the middle, where like he sounds older than Orion Pax is written, if that makes sense. And then when he becomes Optimus Prime, he sounds younger than Optimus Prime is written, if that makes any sense. So he's kind of in the middle through the whole movie.
Exactly.
Which kind of helps you, stay grounded during his many transformations.
Yes.
But I think that performance-wise, it's like the faces. Once you get used to it, you get attached to it.
Yes. He's interesting in that I mostly got attached to his performance of Orion Pax in the middle of the movie.
Yes.
It started where it's like, oh, I don't like this. And not in just like an aesthetic way. It just felt forced, most of the performance. Then in the middle, it's like, okay, I get used to this. And then by the end, I was like, it still doesn't feel right. And it's mainly the performance of like doing the American accent. It sounded a lot like he was trying too hard to do the American accent, and it was detracting from his performance.
Right.
That being said, I think he did it pretty good. I just don't think he stuck the landing towards the end of the movie. And then character-wise, they took him in a unique direction where he's not the typical, like, shy nerd data clerk. In fact, they actually swapped it a little bit where D16 is more of the reticent one, and Orion Pax is the pusher, mover, and shaker of the duo, which I thought was an interesting choice, but I feel like it works character-wise, leading into his transformation into Optimus Prime, in that he's more tempered, he's more even and measured by the end of the movie. That makes sense coming from originally being kind of a crazy hothead in a way. But, yeah. I do like that change. I don't think it should be the consistent one, but I do like the change.
Yeah, I thought that was very interesting. It is a different take on Orion Pax than we've had before, because like in G1 we get kind of the by the rules and looking up to his superiors. He even looks up to Megatron at one point in Generation 1, Orion Pax does. And then in Prime, of course, you've got the whole backstory of the data clerk, and he's much more kind of straight-laced, and then when he becomes Optimus Prime, he's very stoic. And then in Animated, you have kind of an interesting character where, you know, I'd say all of Animated is kind of young Optimus Prime.
Yes.
Right? But he is still kind of like this charismatic and well-meaning leader type figure. Whereas in this movie, and I think that it's a sort of a cultural shift as well. He's one of the miners as well. So he's in the lower class. Yeah. And he's much more rambunctious in this movie and much more snarky, and which is fitting with, like, you know, we call it, you know, dad joke Prime from G1 and stuff like that. And it feels like, yeah, this is where this person could have come from, like, in his troubled youth, right? Yes. You know, and then they kind of switched, and we'll talk. They kind of switched. They gave D16 kind of Orion Pax's character arc from the G1 episode, Gordon, in a way. And I think that for this film, you're right. Orion Pax being much more rambunctious and over the top at the beginning of the film, and then having that character arc of becoming more not necessarily like deadly serious. You know, he's still.
But there's more weight behind his actions.
There's more weight, but you also still see that leadership potential in him, right? He's more like Hot Rod from the original movie.
That is very interesting, but it makes sense when you think about it.
Yeah. Because, like, if you take Hot Rod's character arc, he's kind of this rambunctious youth that grows up over the course of the movie and takes leadership by the end of it.
Yeah. I'm just waiting for his burned out divorced dad phase.
That's season 3.
Yeah.
That's all of season 3.
That's what I'm saying. Listen, Optimus Prime has room for it if they're going to do more movies.
Yeah. No, so it's definitely a change to what we would expect, but I think it really works for this film. So let's go ahead and talk about D16.
Yes. Visually, I love that his original character design is a callback to his original box art and color scheme with the
black head.
The black helmet.
Yeah, the helmet. The black helmet.
Again, you know, smaller character design. I liked how they made most of the miners look uniform, but that they might have, like, smaller specializations behind them.
Yeah, I thought that was kind of a neat choice to have. It sort of falls into that protoform kind of concept where you have, like, this base model and then your alt mode adds kibble.
Exactly.
Right? You know? Because the cogless miners are all very similar body types. They got similar shoulders, or they got a similar chest or something like that.
Feels like a good callback.
And then they got heads that are reminiscent of, you know, G1 characters.
Yes, and
boy, are there a lot of G1 characters in the background. There's a slight tangent. I actually think that it is a great, like, representation of just having all the toys, you know, and then just using them as civilians in the background that don't know that one day they're going to be sucked into this war, you know. Yeah. I think it worked really well to flesh out the world and make it alive by having all of these characters who we know and love from previous media. You know, they look like their G1 counterparts, or at least they're reminiscent of their G1 counterparts as civilians, because, you know, in so many other going back to the Bionicle analogy, Bionicle Legend of the Metro Nui, you got the Matoran, right? You got hordes of Matoran. Name one of them other than Kungu.
Nibiru.
No. Okay, other than the named guys that we know of from other stuff, in the Miramax movie Metro Nui.
Ah, okay.
And we don't even get Kungu's name in the movie, right? He's being held upside down by Nadiki, right?
Yes.
Other than the main guys, none of those Matoran in the movie, none of those Matoran have names, right? So while they are the heart of Metro Nui, and I love Matoran, they're so adorable. They don't have any names. They don't
Yeah.
have any personality. They don't have any backstory. Whereas in here, because everybody has a name and everybody you can pick out and point to, oh, that's that character, you can guess that everybody has a backstory, a life story, you know, a personality and stuff like that.
And it's a good way to do fan service in that it's like blink and you'll miss it sort of moments of like, oh, hey, that's Wheeljack. And then he's gone.
Yeah, yeah.
Like, he's gone before you can even recognize that he was there, sort of thing.
Right.
And so you don't really get too much characterization out of them in the movie, but it's very nice to see, and then also like potential for sequels and everything.
Yeah. Remember, this was supposed to be our lightning round.
Yeah.
Okay, Megatron, D16
Visually, design. I love the callback. As the movie progresses, it's getting close to a definitive Megatron character design.
And it looks kind of like War for Cybertron, the video game.
There's even like his cannon that he has is an almost 1-to-1 recreation of his cannon from War for Cybertron by the end of the movie.
Right.
With like the tri-barrel design and everything.
Yeah.
Very cool to see. And performance-wise,
Voice acting.
I think Brian Tyree Henry is probably going to at some point be the next gold standard for a Megatron performance.
As far as like humanizing D16's backstory and for this movie, his performance is fantastic. I absolutely loved the job he did here. He very nearly steals the show from.
I was going
to
say he probably has the most standout performance out of any of the cast in this movie.
However, as Megatron at the end, I feel like they're going to have to, like, if they do a second movie and they really lean into him being the evil leader from, like, you know, the War for Cybertron games or, you know, even the live action movie or something like that. He's going to have to change his voice again. I feel like by the end of this movie, the D16 that we fell in love with over the course of the film is still in there.
Yes.
Yeah.
And I think he does a good job at like still letting you know that underneath all of that rage and everything, D16 is still there.
Yeah.
I think if he maintains the voice he uses for Megatron by the end of the movie, that sounded like it put a lot of vocal strain on him.
Yeah.
So it might not be easy to sustain.
Yeah, but I do feel like it would be necessary to either add that rasp of Frank Welker's Megatron or the deepness of what's his name, Fred Tatasciore?
Yes.
Is that his name? From the War for Cybertron, the bellowing.
Yes.
You know? Or just the lovable campiness of David Kay's Megatron, one of my favorite Megatrons.
Yeah.
But yeah, no. As D16, it just the standout performance of this film, I think.
And then character-wise, as far as doing a precursor to Megatron, this is incredible.
Yeah, because this is a point in Megatron's career that we've never seen before.
Yes.
In so many other things, like in the Prime backstory, when Orion meets him, he's already working his way up and he's already got his evil schemes going, right?
Yes.
You know, this is before he was ever evil. And like I talked about, he kind of has Optimus's War Dawn character arc where he's very straight-laced. He's he basically worships the people that betray him later on, and that's what makes him just snap in the middle of the movie, you know?
Is that he was too trusting.
He was too trusting, and the people who trust... slight spoiler here. It's a good representation of the people who trust the system the most when they're betrayed by the system become the most dangerous distrusters and anti-system people, right? You know, I think that it really provided a good Megatron.
And like by the end of this movie, you are supposed to believe that they are fundamentally ideologically opposed to each other.
Yes.
I really do believe that by the end of the movie.
Yeah.
And I think that it says most to the themes and everything of the movie.
Yeah.
But also just how thoroughly they fleshed out D16 as a character.
Yeah.
And it's tough when you start rooting for D16 almost more than Orion Pax. where in the end, you know, okay, he's definitely crossed the line. But you can't help but root for him because they are both underdog stories.
Yeah.
And seeing how they like diverge from each other towards the end, I think they do a great job of like there is a bit of a believability gap jump towards the middle of the movie where it's like you're signposting that he's going to be evil and it's kind of hard to avoid sort of thing.
Yeah.
And you know by the end of the movie he has to. But I think with the limited amount of time that they had to do it and they did not need to go as in-depth as they did with making it a believable descent into Decepticon status.
But I am so glad they did.
If they didn't, it would fundamentally not work.
Right. And there's even a point in the movie where you have a slight hope that maybe Optimus will talk him down.
Just maybe they can reconcile.
Just maybe they can reconcile. And then... but then the movie continues and you see that no, he's going further and further down this path.
This goes deeper than a repairable thing.
Yeah, and then and that all works so well to create one of the most emotionally impactful parts of the movie.
Yeah.
It was funny. My wife said it was like 3/4 of the way through the film, and she said, "Oh, I know who that is."
Yes.
Like, so
but that should be the effect.
And that is, yeah. I thought that was really great that the film was able to, if you didn't know that D16 is a previous form of Megatron and blah, 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 and that this was going to be the falling out, where Megatron comes from and stuff. And just like the way that the film sucks you in and makes you believe that, they really are friends,
Yes. And again, they do
yeah.
really lean into, like, especially in the early half, you really believe they are buddies. Not just friends, but, like, friends united by circumstance, but they get along. Like, they are buddies with each other, so...
Yeah, that's one of my one gripes about the film, is that they tell you that too much. There's like 50 times in the first third of the film where they're just like, you're my best friend. I'm so glad you have my back.
That is understandable. However,
that was that was my one major critique of the film. My one major critique of like the writing was like, yep, they're sure good buddies because they sure tell you that they're good buddies.
I understand that. However, it is very fun to see just two dudes being bros.
Yeah.
Real quick, I think we could rattle off
okay.
Bumblebee, Alpha Trion,
Elita 1.
Elita 1. I think we can rattle
Sentinel
off those,
Prime.
and then we can get into spoilers.
Here, let me do real quick. I'll run us through the named characters that have like substantial lines. Okay, Bumblebee. He's basically Benny the Spaceman from the Lego Movie.
Yeah, pretty much.
And kind of like Toad, and his voice actor does Toad in...
Keegan-Michael Key.
Yeah. He does Toad in the Mario movie, and he kind of fits that role, but not to an egregious extent.
Yes.
That's what I was afraid of in the trailers, that he was going to be, obviously he's the comic relief character. He's supposed to be the comic relief character, because he's the kid appeal character. He's always been the kid appeal character. Well, originally Hound was like but anyway.
Yeah.
It's not too bad in this film.
Yeah.
It's actually enjoyable. You do end up liking B by the end of the movie. Some of his jokes are a little lame. Overall, I thought that he works fine.
B is, visually, he's just Bumblebee, which is perfect. It's perfectly fine.
He's got a good blend of sort of War for Cybertron Bumblebee and Bumblebee.
Yes. Performance-wise, he's mostly just Keegan-Michael Key doing Keegan-Michael Key.
Yeah.
It's not a bad thing. It just felt like it wasn't really uniquely Bumblebee. No,
I'm sorry. He's animated Bumblebee.
Yes, he is animated
personality-wise, he's animated Bumblebee.
He's animated Bumblebee. He's a little bit of, like, maybe Hotshot and stuff just off of, like, the...
Except he doesn't have the same character arc that animated Bumblebee.
Character arc-wise...
Because animated Bumblebee's character arc spanned an entire 3 seasons, whereas this guy is in one movie, and he's Benny the Spaceman from the Lego Movie.
Character-wise, I don't really think he gets that much play.
Yeah.
And I felt like there was some opportunities where he could have.
Yeah.
That's okay. I would rather him take a back seat so that we can have the main story of Orion Pax and D16.
Yeah.
I would like to see more of a character arc from him in the future.
Yeah. Alita 1.
Alita 1. Visually, basically Alita 1. I like how they made her more sleek. There was some elements of like Transformers Prime RC that were in there.
Yeah.
Especially in the eyes.
Yeah. I like how she wasn't just pink, she was more like a chrome purple.
Yes. And I also loved seeing the other Autobots from the like Chromia, Moonracer, and I think Firestar was in there at some point. And it was cool to see them.
Voice actor.
Scarlett Johansson, mostly just doing Scarlett Johansson.
Yeah.
But she is, at this point, a pretty accomplished voice actress, so, like, I'll give it a pass.
Character arc.
Character arc.
Or characterization.
She has a good foil. I think they did a good job at making her distinct from RC in this.
Yeah, she's a decent foil for Optimus Prime in that I like that her character arc, she starts out disliking Optimus Prime. This is one of these, I want to talk about this in the spoilers also. This is one of those writing tricks that always works, is you have a character who disapproves of the screw-up character until the darkest hour when they say, hey, you're not so bad. I need you to, you know, keep being. You have more potential. And then once you realize, once the character who disapproves of the screw up character starts approving of them, you know that they've been doing a character arc,
yes.
right? She kind of fulfills that role. She's also one character that I feel like would have benefited if this movie was longer.
Yes.
I'm glad that it was short, but I feel like there's at least one scene missing that needed to be there, and that's and we'll talk about that when it's spoilers, but it would have helped her characterization be not such a jerk in the first half of the movie.
Yeah.
Because the way it is in the final film, she's kind of really a jerk in the first half of the film, and then afterwards,
but not in an annoying way.
But yeah, she becomes likable by the end of the movie.
Yes.
But there is a part in there that I'm just like, dude, chill out.
Yeah.
Anyway, Alpha Trion.
Visually, I love this character design.
I like it too. I like as a different thing. I don't know where him turning into a battle unicorn comes from. I know he turned into a lion in one toy, but he's always been assumed to turn into a spaceship, even when we don't see him turn into one.
Yeah.
And then some of his toys are a spaceship, but then out of the blue, there's just this lion Alpha Trion, and I've never like really understood where that came from. And now he's a battle unicorn, and I'm like, cool.
It looks good.
Yeah.
I'm not against it.
But I love how the 13 primes are bigger than normal Transformers, and
his
I like how
was intimidating in a
very
good way.
Voice actor
Lawrence Fishburne. I'll talk a little bit about his performance in spoiler territory, but I think he kind of gave a flatter performance than I've seen out of him before.
I think it's funny. This is the one like metatextual joke that they put in there, is that he basically is doing his Matrix thing where he gives,
he's basically Morpheus.
He's giving out, red pills to them in the movie, which isn't a spoiler because it's in the trailers.
Yeah.
But he's basically doing his Morpheus thing.
Yes,
in this,
but I love how he was an
movie.
intersection of ancient Cybertronian, where most of the modern Cybertronian stuff is very sleek, very uniform.
Not quite as clockworky as Vector Prime from Cybertron, but
I think that should stay with Vector Prime.
He does feel ancient.
He feels
his introduction feels kind of like Jetfire from the live action movies, but in a good way.
Yes,
I think not so many fart jokes.
Yeah, I think he's a good example of in comparison to the other Cybertron, he's a good example of visual storytelling in that. He's ancient. He even has moss growing on his back.
I like that detail. I saw somebody did a modification of the toy where they painted him up to look like that.
That's very cool.
Gave him moss and stuff. It looked great.
But also his character design being beat up from age and asymmetrical because of age. Is very visually interesting. His cape and his just overall shape design being so unique and also like his size as well. It feels like comparing a 1956 Bel Air to a Chevrolet Impala of 2004. Like comparing a 2004 Impala to a 1956 Chevy Bel Air.
or cars our parents owned.
Yeah.
Anyway, Sentinel Prime.
Sentinel Prime. Loved the visual design on
Yeah,
him.
it's fantastic blend of War for Cybertron. Well, that was Zeta Prime, and for it's a similar thing. The Dark of the Moon and animated.
Yes. Very gilded sort of
Yeah,
look.
yeah.
And I absolutely love the different elements of his character design that will like pop up later in the movie.
Yeah.
That alter his appearance. Very cool. John Hamm is pretty understated in his performance.
Really? I thought he was hamming it up.
He was hamming it up. Very funny. But not really understated isn't a good word for it, but like
He's
he
kind
was
of like
hamming it up, but he wasn't going like off the walls or anything.
he was a more measured. I think that he hit just the sweet spot of what that character needed because
Yes.
Slight spoiler: he's kind of like Lord Business in the Lego Movie.
I was even gonna say like,
But more like, befitting of the Transformers and the serious tone that they were
yes,
taking.
the first thing
He kind of really fits into exactly that type of characterization that he's going for.
Yes, I think my brain was starting to draw parallels at certain points in the movie to a Homelander type of characterization of that, like, really measured and or not measured, but you feel like you could pop at any moment, sort of.
Yeah. He's holding back. He's got this sort of austere business persona, that very politician.
Yeah.
Very, very politician. A man of the
Charismatic.
air quotes, charismatic man of the people. But underneath, he's hiding.
Yeah, simmering under the surface.
He
is
could
this,
really blow up at any moment.
Yeah, explosive.
Arachnid.
Absolute killer redesign.
I love. She fits into this perfect trope of this classic like. I feel like this was a trope that was heavy in like the 2000s, where the main where the politician bad guy would have this creepy woman sidekick,
Like silent killer type.
Yeah, and she perfectly fits into that
Yes.
category.
It's always funny hearing the name Arachnid.
Yeah. But it's kind of neat to see representation that from
a more recent
a more recent original character. I'm surprised Windblade wasn't in here.
Yes.
But, maybe a movie
The
too.
alternate form to robot mode translation is such a good example of Transformers don't necessarily have to have conventionally human robot forms.
Yeah.
And can still be wildly visually interesting.
She's very trans tech.
Yes,
The
hollow legs, the spindly.
If you don't
limbs
know
and
what
stuff.
that is, that's a very cool cyberpunk concept art for a series that was going to come after Beast Machines, but they kind of canceled it. They did cancel it.
Yeah.
It never went into production.
But you can find the concept art
pretty
online,
easily,
and
yeah,
it's very visually interesting and unique.
Yeah, and she kind of fits into that mold with like the wheel in her knee,
Yes.
giving her digitigrade legs, and then the creepy eyes everywhere. She is very
probably
yeah.
the most visually interesting character design in the movie.
Yeah.
Performance-wise, kind of does.
She does what she needs to do.
Does what he needs to do. Mostly just creepy silent killer.
Right. Starscream.
Starscream. Steve Buscemi, fantastic.
I loved Starscream in this.
Absolutely.
He's not
Gets so
characterization. He's in there for so little, but he is absolutely chewing the scenery exactly how you think that Starscream would.
Exactly.
This is Starscream through and through. You know exactly who he is, what he's about. You get some backstory on him, even though he doesn't have a whole lot to do in this movie.
Very much
Voice acting was perfect.
Yes.
Character design, very War for Cybertron Starscream. Very
less bulky, closer to the
very
original
the the kind of evergreen Starscream design we
Yeah.
see in like Cyberverse and Earthspark and RAD 2015 and G1 and blah, blah,
Yeah.
blah, blah, blah.
Iconic.
Iconic. Soundwave and Shockwave.
Shockwave mostly served as the butt of a joke most of the time.
Shockwave was not Shockwave. He's just kind of there.
Visually,
He's just kind of a guy that's there.
Visually, he was absolutely just one-to-one Shockwave.
Yeah,
it's cool.
it's just Shockwave from the Bumblebee movie.
Yes. Soundwave, I thought was really good. He got some play.
He got a little bit of play. He had some things to do. He's got his alternate mode from the Bumblebee movie.
Yes, and I do like that he actually is like living up to his name, using sound waves, and visually very cool. A little bit sleeker than we've normally seen. A little bit thinner.
Yeah, not a lot to do, but he's there and he's cool.
Yes.
All right, I think that's most of the... Quintessons.
The Quintessons. Very visually unique, different from what we've normally seen Quintesson-wise. And again, we haven't seen a whole lot of variations on the Quintessons since
I really
Generation
like their
1.
kind of Yuzhong Vong organic technology vibe.
Yes,
The biotech is very creepy. So their design is really nice. Characterization, they kind of fit into a similar vein that they do in the Transformers Prime lore.
They're mostly alien and stick to that feeling of being an alien threat.
I feel like they could have been mentioned more earlier in the film to kind of give a little more weight to their appearance in the middle of the film. But since they don't reappear and are apparently being saved for the next movie, they are. I feel like it's serviceable. How much they show up.
They did enough to show you that these are a extremely unknowable and vast threat that is probably has like a galactic spanning empire of some kind.
I feel like their existential dread could have been increased some more in this movie, but then I feel like they would have had to have been in the end of the movie, and then that would have created an entire fourth act, and then it would have been like a 3-hour long movie, and we didn't need that.
I thought they were going to get more play in the movie, but that's not a bad thing.
Yeah. So that's our one like kind of cliffhanger that this movie leaves us with, but I mean honestly, so does the Covenant of Primus.
Yes.
So,
but that's mainly what it's pulling from is the Covenant of Primus material with the Quintesson War.
Yeah.
And I like that they didn't feel the need to fully finish things with the Quintessons and leaving them as more of a unknowable mystery and threat.
And even if this is like the one movie that we get, that's kind of cool because it gives kids something to imagine playing with their toys with.
Yes, they give them a sense of scale to the universe.
Yeah.
But visually, they were a little more round than I thought, but it contrasts really well with the play on their tentacles.
I mean, they were eggs in the original movie.
Yes, but...
with 5 faces. I don't know why they're called Quintessons in here if they only have 1 face,
yes.
but,
but yes.
They kind of draw from Alpha Q's design in Energon also.
I do like that.
I really like that, yeah.
They feel similar in presentation, at least, to the Tyranids from Warhammer 40k.
Yeah.
But especially, like, visually, the mixing of deep sea sort of abyssal character designs with like everything's very like fish and shells.
Yes,
and
I like that. Kind of like a
crabs.
crab. Their ship kind of looks like a crab or something. Yeah, very good. One last thing I want to talk about before we move on to our spoiler section. Music. What'd you think about the music?
Good. Brian Tyler, who reprises from Transformers Prime.
And he does the live action movies too, doesn't he?
Does. Yeah. Well, no. It varies.
Oh, Steve Jablonsky does.
Jablonsky did the first one.
I think so.
Not sure who did the other ones.
I think Brian Tyler came out in the later ones.
But yes, the score it's not super distinct, but
it kind of fits into that live action Prime kind of.
It hits perfectly when it needs to. Specifically when they actually pull the Transformers Prime theme into it. It happens briefly, and it's very, very effective.
Yeah. There's there's a lot of good parts, and then there's a lot of filler parts as well, just kind of ambient music. But there's a lot of good parts where they like, the soundtrack kicks into high gear.
Yes.
Now, speaking of the soundtrack, I want to address something that I was kind of worried about. We were talking about being worried that it was going to be kind of like an Illumination movie, like it was going to be kind of like too much like the Mario movie, right? I liked the Mario movie as a Mario movie, my one gripe with the Mario movie was the best part of the soundtrack was whenever they were doing themes from the video games, because the video games have legendary music, right?
Yes.
The worst part of the soundtrack, and generally the movie, was the needle drops, when they would just shove in, for no reason, some song that people recognize on the radio for 3 seconds, and then it was gone.
Yeah.
Yeah, I hated that. I'm not against needle drops. Guardians of the Galaxy does a fantastic job of using music, especially in the second movie, most of all, using music to help tell the story, using popular songs to help tell the story.
Yeah.
But what I love the most is Generation 1 movies' use of original or first time showing up in a movie songs as part of the storytelling.
Right.
It's part of the story. It's part of the, it's not just say, oh, I know that song. They're all original songs, or they were made and not used for something else, and then they get put in this movie, right?
Yeah.
Like I think The Touch was originally written for a Sylvester Stallone movie, but it ended up not being used, so it got used in the Transformers movie. Right. Anyway, weird little fun facts. But then a lot of the other ones were made specifically for it, or were from like not as big named things, right?
Yeah.
They did not have any needle drops in this movie, and it made me happy.
Yes.
Because, once again, they're not being meta with it. They are telling a good story.
Precisely.
This is like, the thing that people were saying about, like, Top Gun, and, like, why don't they make movies like Lord of the Rings anymore, is because so many movies now are just too meta, too cynically self-aware. Right? Instead of just focusing on telling you a good story. This movie tells you a good story, and it sticks with telling you a good story.
Yes.
It gets a little corny sometimes, but when does Transformers not get corny?
Right.
That's its MO, and Transformers is always supposed to have some fun to it,
Exactly.
All right. Let's take a short break, and then we'll talk spoilers. And we're back with spoilers.
Spoilers.
And first of all, I want to apologize to everybody listening, and Hayden in particular, for promising that this would be like 20 minutes. We're already at an hour.
We all know it's going to go... if we get something under an hour, that is a miracle.
Yeah, like our trigger analysis.
Yes. But, spoiler talk.
Even my toy review was supposed to be like a minute long, and it was like 6. Anyway.
We're long-winded people.
Yeah. This is why we do our podcast. Spoilers. All right. What do you want to talk about first? I've actually I want to talk about the very beginning of the movie.
Yes.
This movie starts out good. I was watching a video recently that was talking about exposition and how to deliver exposition. And everybody knows about the trope of a movie starting out with a long exposition of somebody describing something that happened in the past that's going to have vague ramifications for what's happening in the present, right? Lord of the Rings does it with a 7-minute sequence of summarizing the entirety of the end of the Silmarillion, basically. Yes. In that video, they put out one way of delivering exposition, and this just goes for any exposition. It could be, how a bomb works or something, right? Is to present it as information that a character that you're invested in wants to learn.
Yes.
And then that helps the audience to want to learn it too. This movie began with that trick of Orion Pax sneaking into the archives because he wanted to learn the exposition about how Cybertron was created and who the 13 primes were and what happened to the Matrix.
And they got to have their cake and eat it too, because it was information portrayed in a montage.
Right.
That was how data was transferred into the little discs and stuff that he's looking for.
Right.
That's how you find it out. It's got a little hologram that shows the visuals to the history of everything.
Yeah. And then it's in the middle of a chase sequence too, so it's like, you've got two things going on at once, so props for them for starting out, without, just dryly giving us exposition, making it interesting. So we're already off to a good start.
It's also a great start because it's in a very tightly cramped room that's very dark. And then as the chase continues, it explodes into the synthwave aesthetic Iacon City.
Yeah.
The Gilded City. The Gilded Cyberpunk Underground, incredible aesthetic and incredible introduction to just the frenetic, constantly changing pace of the actual city of Cybertron.
Yeah. I thought it was weird that they had those, trains and roads that the road appears. Yeah, the road appears in front of them, which kind of works because the city's coming from the roof and from the ground, so you need to be able to get through. And some people turn into cars and they can't fly, so But everybody is able to have Sideswipe's rocket pack.
Yes.
Anyway. It would see that would have been a great chance for them to throw in a little thing of just Sideswipe is the one that provides them with the rocket packs or something like that. But see, that's the movie just staying on target and not going out of its way to make unnecessary references.
Most of the information we get about Cybertron is usually directly related to the situation that Orion Pax and D16 are in.
Yeah.
And
I think it's pretty neat that they don't go up onto the surface very much and that they always stay under.
Yeah, it's a good unique blending of 3 or 4 different Cybertronian elements from previous entries.
Yeah.
You have the inhospitable upper environment from the IDW line of comics. And you have the underground's kind of Coruscant-ish vibe.
Yeah.
And
then you got
the way that the Cybertronian structure, the society is structured. You have the caste system under different terms and stuff.
Yeah. It's very similar. We've been making allusions to it, but the core story is very similar to what's laid out in the Covenant of Primus and Transformers Exodus.
Yes.
It's very similar, except now Optimus is a minor also. He's not. He doesn't start out in the, whereas Exodus takes a much more slower paced and political and intrigue and convoluted story that is very particular and stuff. This very condenses it down, very drives it quicker, gets you attached to the characters quicker, etc., etc.
Yeah.
Something I talked about previously is that the core theme of transformation becomes part of the story. It does actually fit in really well, because I was thinking about Exodus a while back, and I was like, Transformers kind of loses its mystique but its main thing in book form, where when they transform into vehicles and stuff, it's just not as interesting as it is in book form as it is visually.
It's hard to portray the visuals of 30-foot tall mechanical beings that transform into vehicles.
Yeah.
I think they do a decent enough job, but it also helps that there was already visual reference with the games and everything.
Right. So when we were watching this and they're cogless for the first half of the movie, I was like, so what's the point of them being Transformers, right? And then when Alpha Trion gives them the transformation cogs and it gives them his inspiring speech about being able to transform your life and stuff. Oh, I'm sorry. Yeah. I was like, oh, I get it now, because they're transforming their situation, they're transforming their outlook on life. They're transforming that, they're transforming their social ability, their character arcs.
Stop slamming stuff. It shows up every time.
Hayden's just making all these stop it motions while I'm like pounding my fist on my knee and my ring on the table. And I should know, I do editing sometimes. I should know that this is terrible for audio quality and stuff, but I'm sorry. Anyway,
it's fine.
Yeah, but like it really fits into their core like character arcs. Is, you know, it's a visual manifestation of, you know, their character arcs, you know, being able to transform and stuff like that. They're also being able to transform their mindsets, their outlooks on life, their viewpoints, you know. And then Sentinel Prime taking their... We're assuming you've seen the movie at this point.
Spoiler territory.
You know,
but Sentinel Prime is a big deceiver.
yeah. And him saying, you know, the truth is what I make it. You know, he
Yes.
takes their transformation cogs, so he's literally instilling his truth into them by
Yes.
taking away their ability to transform.
The cool thing is that Transformers has always played with the idea of Cybertronian society being vaguely dystopic.
Yeah.
But they usually lean into it as like, well, there's oppression and then there's... but it's like very scattered across the society.
Yeah.
This one goes a step further and straight up makes all of Cybertronian culture a dystopia, at least in Iacon.
Yeah.
It is a fully controlled Matrix-style scenario of everything that you've known as a lie. Mm-hmm. And also very ironic that they got Lawrence Fishburne to be the person to
Exactly.
tell them that.
That's like their, like I said earlier, that's their one meta joke in this.
Yes. But I think it really works because it brings up the question that feels pretty timely, or close to home at least, is what do you do when you realize that the society you're a part of is so fundamentally out of your control and has been for, they say cycles, but 50 years, and you're living in a system that does not care about you, and but gives you the facade that it does.
Right, because Sentinel Prime is so good at, like, you know, being that politician.
Yeah, he's a charismatic leader, but you also get
it's all because he's just using that to get what he wants out of you.
Right. And
right? He's a manipulative person.
Like, a lot of Transformers, especially Megatron's backstory, is a eat the rich sort of scenario. But this one applies it to all of the characters in that.
Right.
Every single person in Cybertronian culture has been lied to.
Yeah.
And it is a true dystopia.
Yeah.
So it brings up the interesting question of, like, okay, the main theme of the movie is transformation. How do you transform the society you're a part of? Do you burn it to the ground?
Yeah.
Or do you fight to change it from the inside? And it's like that being... The setting is directly tied to the division between Orion Pax and D16.
Right.
Which is phenomenal writing.
Yeah. It really helps you believe the character arcs and the division, the divisiveness between them.
Yes.
You know, because that's... I think that that's, you know, whereas, like, there's a lot more subtlety and detail in Exodus, I feel like you feel the characters' emotions much better in this.
Exodus generally gets caught up in the geopolitics of everything.
Yeah. It is a good hard sci-fi.
Yes.
Political sci-fi, if I might. But it loses sight of the character. Now, granted, it has been years since I've read that book. And we will, when we get to G Prime, we are going to reread those books.
Yes.
As a precursor to the episodes. But from what I remember, it is very much more interested in the geopolitics than it is, or it's interested in the characters as much as far as they are vehicles, no pun intended,
yes,
to tell the story, right?
It feels way
which
more
is very classic sci-fi.
Yeah, it feels way more procedural in Exodus.
I don't mind that at all, because that is definitely a mode of sci-fi, and I'm all about that. But the character work that they do in this movie, it really kind of outpaces that. Because you really feel with Megatron, and like I made allusion to earlier, because he's so wrapped up in this is how the society works, and this is how it's supposed to work, and I'm going to do my part to be part of that society. When the curtain is pulled back and he sees how he's been lied to, and Sentinel is actually a traitor, and he's been feeding all of their hard work to the Quintessons, he just snaps.
Yeah.
And he's like, I'm going to burn it all to the ground. I don't, everything's been a waste, so I'm going to get rid of it and build it from scratch. And Optimus is like, no. We can save the good parts and get rid of the bad parts.
Yes.
Right? It's really because, and we've seen this throughout the movie, because throughout the movie, Optimus has always been working with what they had to get what he wanted.
Yes.
Right? It's like, oh, well, we're in this bad situation, but we can still sneak into this place and get the he's had this, and yeah, they kind of said, you have an optimistic spirit at one point. I think it was Alita One that said that, and it's like, that's where he gets the name. It's not as egregious as Han Solo,
yes.
But it's, that's kind of a meta joke, but it's not so bad because it's kind of a joke if you get the context,
Yeah.
But it's not like, breaking the film to make the joke,
Yeah.
But anyway, but he's always had the more optimistic outlook and making the best of the situation he's in and being able to turn the situation he's in to his advantage, whereas Megatron is like, this is the situation, I'm either for it or against it.
Right. And here's one minor complaint, I think, is that Orion Pax's development into Optimus Prime doesn't feel nearly as fleshed out as D16's development into Megatron. And that it's mainly because Orion Pax is more of a passenger to his own development. Yeah. Stuff happens to him that changes his outlook. Which, it's a good dichotomy of the first half, he's the pusher, mover, and shaker.
Yeah. D16
is passive.
Yeah.
In the second half, D16 is the pusher, mover, and shaker.
Yeah.
Orion Pax becomes passive. And so I think it works, but it just means that you're getting more and more invested in D16 towards the end of the movie.
Yeah.
Than you are in Orion Pax.
Right.
There is a bit of like Chosen One element to it that feels more esoteric than D16's like concrete development.
Yeah. But that's something that is in Transformers a lot, is the mythology, the mysticism of Primus.
Yes.
Like, we'll talk more about this when we get to Transformers Cybertron and then Prime and stuff like that. But like the whole idea that their god is a literal giant transformer that turns into their planet.
Yeah.
And like some people believe in him and some people don't, but you're still living on top of him,
right.
And he like physically exists, is just such an interesting like twist that you have to accept that as part of the world building,
Yes. And it's really interesting when you see D16 and Orion Pax's dichotomy, or not dichotomy, but Orion Pax's and D16's relationship is hinged on Sentinel Prime's outlook. Is that Sentinel Prime is about power that is taken that isn't earned or deserved.
Yeah.
And on the one hand, it is like you have the power to change your situation. Sentinel Prime was kind of a nobody up until he managed to execute the coup against the 13.
Right.
And take their power for his own. He literally took one of the most powerful Prime's transformation cog, more of as a statement than anything else. I
thought that was really interesting that different cogs can change your transformation.
Yes, I thought that was a very unique element.
Yeah, I thought that was pretty cool. Kind of like a power-up that gives them different powers. Like, not all cogs do the same, since you would be turning into different things. And I don't know how that relates to scanning vehicles, but like, giving them the ability to transform into different things by and that creating more kibble depending on what cog you have.
Yes. And you see that quite a bit with Megatron when he does install Megatronus's T-Cog.
Yeah, because he gets real bulked
Gets
up.
huge. But Megatronus, we don't get anything off of him except for his is where the Decepticon logo comes from.
Yeah.
He has Tarn's face, but we get that he's the biggest.
I think it's interesting that Megatronus isn't the Fallen in here.
Yes.
He has Tarn's face, and then Megatron adopts that just because of strength.
Yes.
Because
he represents
be
power. He represents. He is the physically biggest. He is the strongest, and he is the most imposing, which is why D16 looks up to Sentinel.
Yeah.
Because Sentinel represents that element.
Yeah, because he also has the cog.
Exactly.
Right.
It winds up that it lines his D16's outlook on how he views power and idealized strength.
Yeah.
It becomes more tied together as the movie goes on and more is revealed about how Sentinel Prime took out Megatronus, took his transformation cog. Those power dynamics all come into play into making D16 become less of a righteous fury and more of a vengeance.
Yes. Yeah.
And he is justified in his descent up until it starts becoming vengeance for the sake of vengeance.
Right.
In the desire to inflict pain.
Right. That line when he said, I don't want to just stop him. I want to kill him. I want to make him suffer. I want to parade him around and show him for what he really is,
Yeah.
It's like, and then everybody just stops and is like, whoa.
It's like,
where did
okay,
this
chill
come
out.
from, And then the moment when he drops Optimus and kills him,
Yes.
Number one, it's kind of funny that even in a one-off movie, Optimus dies and comes back to life. But what a bone-chilling moment when he says, "I'm done saving you," because, that's what it's been building up to. Like, I kind of complain about they have been talking, they say, we're such good friends, I've got your back, like 50 times in the first half of the movie, and then, through the second half of the movie, it's like, I'm always rescuing you from all these problems, and stuff like that. But it does lead up to the most bone-chilling moment in the film.
Yes, everything from the moments where D16 is trying to kill Sentinel, and they first come to blows over how they want to move forward now that the deception is exposed and everything.
Yeah.
Everything from that moment onward, I think, hits the level of stuff like the Spider-Verse movies, visually and thematically.
Yeah.
And emotionally.
Yeah.
It is stunning to watch play out.
And the violence in this film, they don't hold back. This is, I wouldn't say it's as graphic and intense as the 86 violence.
Yes.
But it's but they don't hold back on account of kids movie.
Yes.
Right? And you can get away with a lot more because they're giant robots, blah blah
Right.
blah blah blah. But yeah, I mean it's intense in that it's personal and it's emotional. I mean, there's a lot of like Viacon type expendable crewmen and
Yeah, they just kind of get chopped up to bits.
Yeah,
they're
and
stormtroopers.
I don't know what their sentience level is. It kind of feels weird that the Optimus and Bumblebee are just so eager and ready to just chop them in half and tear them up and laugh about it.
It's
and
played.
stuff.
It's played for laughs, but at
I've
the same
always
time,
been
it's like,
uncomfortable with scenes like that, where the good guys are just shooting down faceless enemies and are like, haha,
What a grand time.
oh, we're having fun, It's like, you just killed somebody. Now, granted, these might just be drones, They never have any lines.
Yeah.
They don't even have faces. But, that doesn't mean a Transformer's not a person if they don't have a face,
Precisely.
right? So I don't know what their sentience level is. They're probably just drones, so, I guess it's okay. It is kind of weird, but when it's character on character, just absolute assault. Megatron's brutalization of Sentinel Prime is
He
just
rips
so
Sentinel Prime in half with his bare hands,
incredible.
which is amazing because it also sets up the precedent of I'll tear you apart with my bare hands.
Yeah, yeah. And then also, when he kills Jazz in the live action movie.
Yes.
So once again, whatever generation you want to put or whatever continuity you want to put this in front of,
But I think this movie ends very smartly in that by the end of the movie, I didn't really believe that they had gotten to a point where they were willing to kill each other.
Yeah.
And it ends very smartly by having it be the start of the division.
Ooh, but that fight, though, when he comes
fight.
back as Optimus and Megatron,
Yeah.
that fight was fantastic.
They
and
perfectly
once again,
blended.
like I said before, they actually integrate, being able to transform into their fighting style. You good, bro?
Let's go.
Yeah, they perfectly integrate transforming into their fighting style, and I was very happy to see that.
Yes.
But yeah, you're right. I feel like they're not, even though they say they're Optimus and Megatron at the end of the movie. I feel like they're not quite 100%.
They're Optimus Pax and D6 Megatronus.
Something like that.
But it was very smart to not have it be the beginning of the war. It's just the beginning of the division.
Yeah.
They go their separate
I like how
ways.
he just exiles them.
Yes.
How do you feel about Starscream kind of having the proto Decepticons just kind of chilling on the surface?
I like that a lot because it plays more into the concept of the Seekers and them being more of a royal guard sort of thing. Them having more prestige while also being frustrated with the system being cast off in some way.
Yeah.
You get a very, very effective sequence with Starscream and Megatron first coming to blows.
Yeah.
And a lot of great details in it, but they don't get a ton of play, so it's hard to really kind of place whether or not they were
I feel like it's kind of a shame that we don't get the same level of Megatron gathering his forces. This is something that I feel like Exodus does better, is that it shows Megatron gathering his forces,
Yes.
know?
And he was already beginning to gather them at the very beginning of the book.
Right. Which ironically makes Optimus's gathering of the Autobots in Exodus a little weaker, and then in this movie, Optimus's gathering of the Autobots is stronger in here, and Megatron's gathering of the Decepticons is a little weaker in here. But it works. As a compressed timeline, it works.
I think it works in the sense that you have both of the forces working together in the final fight.
Yeah.
And they're kind of indistinguishable from each other.
Yeah. I do like how they're working together at first, and then after they kill Sentinel, then they divide.
Yes.
And I do think it sets up, it works pretty well with Megatron's eventual theory of, might makes right, peace through tyranny, that he would just brutalize Starscream and then take over the Decepticons that way.
It feels a little off considering that they made Sentinel his foil and reason for I will never be like him.
Yeah.
It does set up a good tragic thing of that you become the very thing.
Yeah, and Optimus even says you've become Sentinel.
Yeah. And but I think it does work.
Yeah.
It's not that he's blind to it, it's just that he's so justified in his
I will do
sense.
it right this time.
Yeah.
Yeah. The funny thing to me, though, is that because of Transformers, no matter how serious or how political or fictional political or how realistic or mythologized or whatever they're trying to do, right? No matter what the series is doing, they are forever saddled with the name Decepticons,
and they have to explain it.
They have to bend over backwards to explain it. They can't just be like, "Yep, it's Decepticons."
And Autobots is pretty easy because you can explain it a number of ways. As in, we're automobile robots.
Yeah.
You can explain it. We are autonomous robotic organisms from the planet Cybertron.
Right.
That one's pretty easy.
Yeah. Decepticons, you always have to justify.
The closest we've gotten...
Unless you just don't say anything about it.
The closest we've ever gotten is Transformers Prime explaining it as we preach the truth, and if that is considered deception, then we wear it as a badge of honor.
Which is pretty good.
Yeah.
I still like the just emissaries from hell.
Pure evil.
Pure evil, transform the Japanese version of Decepticon.
Yeah, but they do a good
So
job
they're
with
just
it,
like-
I think, in this movie of we will be no longer deceived.
Yeah.
And
But it still doesn't make sense, Decepticons.
It really doesn't.
It doesn't make sense.
we were once deceived, but now no longer.
Right.
Which, ironically, if you think about it, would make more sense for them to be called Seekers, because then they'd be Seekers of the Truth, but...
yeah, that would be cool.
But, yeah.
But then
yeah.
that's very mystical sounding.
That's mystical, and also it's not Decepticons, and you have to have it be Decepticons.
I really wouldn't mind it if they didn't use the term Decepticons in this movie. Like, if they called them the Megatrons, or the Destrons, or the Seekers, or something like that, because
It would work, but fundamentally people would not relate to it because it's not Autobots or it's not Autobots
versus
and
Decepticons. It's got to be, But I was just thinking, like,
But this movie does set it up to where it's like you could have if you wanted to.
Yeah,
and
yeah,
it would have worked.
Yeah, I mean, they never say. I don't think they ever said Decepticons until the post-credit scene. In this continuity, I feel like, if they went with a different name, I'd be okay with it. You can still use the Decepticon logo, but if they used a different name, I'd be okay with it.
Yeah.
Switching gears, transforming our discussion, because we do probably need to wrap it up. And we don't want to get too much into our analysis, because we want to save something for later.
When we actually talk about it.
Yeah, we said we're not going to do an analysis. Here we are doing a complete discussion of the film, the themes. I feel like that's just kind of our review of the themes of the film, though.
Yeah.
We're not getting too into the weeds here, though. We'll probably say much of the same stuff again when we get there. Anyway, two things I didn't like. Alita 1. I feel like there's a deleted scene or something where, like, when they're trying to save Jazz from the mine shaft, right? The great characterization on Optimus and Megatron, or Orion
D16.
Pax and D16, reflects horribly on Alita 1. Because she's just nag about, you're ruining my promotion, you need to get out of there. It's like, well, what about Jazz? He's going to die. And she's basically like, leave Jazz, And then they get him out, but they never show him after they get out of the, this is kind of on the editing side, is they never show Jazz after they get out of the mine shaft, right? So for a while, I didn't know did he make it? And then she's just really mad about it. So it would have made sense if he didn't make it, and she was mad that they stopped and still failed, right?
Yes.
But because they did make it, because he shows up later in the movie, he did make it, and she even says, "Hey, you saved Jazz. You're an optimist and all that."
Yeah.
Because he did make it, she's still really nagging them about, like, you screwed up and you're gonna ruin my promotion and blah 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 and stuff, and it's like, they saved somebody's life. Are you that evil?
Well,
she just really comes off as evil in that moment.
Yeah, in that moment. But
and I see it. It's a how the system and the oppression is ingrained into their own philosophy and stuff like that. But it just feels like, since she becomes an important character later, it feels like they could have at least had a scene where she was, like, checking on Jazz, like, "Oh, Jazz, are you all right? Well, at least you saved him, but you screwed up," Anything could have made that interaction a little bit better and me hate Alita 1 a little less. Because for the first half of the movie, I'm just like, oh, man, she's terrible.
Well, I was fine with it because I tend to like people who are... like irredeemable jerks because they don't really try to justify their behavior, not as like advocation or anything. It's just that sometimes there's people who are that way.
No. As a character, I'm perfectly fine with that stuff if you're gonna stick with that.
But I think it gets as we learn more about Alita, which isn't much, but we learn more that her outlook is more focused on, she's just very industry minded.
Yeah.
She's very job oriented, and everything is about success or failure.
Right.
And by the end of the movie, we see that also transfers to that she is loyal. She is loyal to a fault. Is that if I have something that I can believe in, then I will do everything and anything it takes to see that vision fulfilled.
Which also kind of makes her a foil to Megatron's character arc as well.
Is that by any means necessary, it will be done. Which sets up a very unique character dynamic in that she's more of the weapon.
Yeah.
To Optimus's like idealism and paragonness is that
she's the strong right arm.
Yeah, she's potentially able to do the things that he would not be willing to.
Yeah.
And I think that sets up a good character dynamic, but at the cost of some likability by the earlier parts of the movie.
I don't mind the idea of her being a jerk at the beginning and then being redeemed over the course of the movie.
There does seem to be a few episodes.
I just feel like they needed to address Jazz some more. They needed to either address her shortcomings, like she needed a scene where she realized that, dang, I would have left Jazz to die. That's terrible of me, you know? I'm no better than, Sentinel leaving Alpha Trion to be killed by the Quintessons and stuff, you know? If she had some moment of self-reflection,
yes,
it would have been a lot better for her.
There was a moment of reconciliation, but there wasn't a moment of reflection.
I think that was the main place where they actually screwed up in the writing or in the editing. I don't know at what level they cut that out or just didn't think to include it, but they needed some scene where she had self-reflection.
A handful of times it felt like there was a scene that was like, was something missing here? But I think it was just, lost in the edit or something.
Yeah. Because they were trying to, it is they're trying to compact it into 100 minutes.
Yeah.
104 minutes, I think it is. But the... so that's I think that's the one like major shortcoming of this film, I think, is that Alita 1 is missing a self-reflection moment.
Yeah.
And it could have even been when she caught them on the train or something. It's like, she could have been self-reflecting like, man, I would have let Jazz die, and then snaps it back in, like we see that it's kind of a facade for her or something like that.
Who knows?
I don't know where you would have fit it in, but like we just need to address the Jazz in the room. Speaking of Jazz and his name and other things, is that I love the joke about Steve being a foreigner.
Yes.
I'm going to assume what I generally assume about fantasy and science fiction being it's the whole, Lord of the Rings is translated and localized into English, right?
Yeah.
So a lot of the jokes and stuff need to be sort of, what we would get as humans, but some of them come at the cost of not making sense for Transformers. For instance, and I think that this kind of went too far for Orion Pax. I get the more, Hot Rod. And like I said, he's kind of like Hot Rod, and yeah, Hot Rod would do this, but only after he's been exposed to Earth culture. Orion Pax is about to flip the guy the bird, right? There's no reason he should know what that is, unless it implies that they do that kind of thing on the Cybertron.
I'll let you know.
I hate to bring that up, but that joke kind of broke my immersion.
I'm cutting this out.
Okay, for reasons that we will discuss in our deeper analysis video, I don't like the joke that Optimus almost flipped Darkwing the bird. Okay?
Yes. I will say most of the jokes that are egregiously comic relief jokes, they still made me laugh.
Yeah.
Which says a lot for them, but it was more of like a waggle the finger, like, oh, you sort of thing.
Yeah. Some of it was dumb jokes. Some of the humor actually landed. I thought it was pretty funny. Some of it was just kind of dumb jokes. There was a couple of cringy jokes, but overall, I don't think that the humor detracts from the movie at all.
Exactly.
And there is actual, like, inherent humor, too. Like, just stuff that is actually funny because of, either the situation, the scenario, or, they don't go out of their way to create a joke. It just organically creates itself, right?
Exactly. now.
Okay.
So we have to have to end it.
Let's go ahead and wrap it up. Is there anything else that you want to discuss?
I'm
Or
good.
okay, yeah, I think that we've pretty much.
We've exhausted it.
I think that, as for a review without going into further analysis that we allegedly will save for later, I think that this is a pretty decent review.
We're at 2 hours. It's a decent review.
Yeah, not our complete thoughts on it. I suppose, but we will, in 80 years we'll have a part 2, basically.
Yes.
So, yeah, thanks for joining us, and we hope that if you haven't seen the film, that you will. I don't know why you've listened this long if you haven't.
Go watch it.
It's
genuinely
really
worth it.
good. I really like this movie. What about you?
I really enjoyed this movie.
Yeah.
And
if you
I
are
definitely...
a Transformer fan, you owe it to yourself to see this movie. If you are interested in getting into Transformers, this is a good jumping on point. Maybe not the best, but it's still really good.
Yes.
This is one of the movies we can be proud of. We got a good one in there, guys.
We got a good Transformers movie.
We got a good Transformers movie. Up there with Bumblebee and the '86 movie.
Yes.
But
definitely, give it a shot, even if you're not remotely familiar with Transformers. Give it a shot. It's definitely worth the watch.
Yeah, I think that this was actually a really well-written film. It's got its shortcomings, but overall, I think that it's a good, and it's fun. It is a fun movie.
It's an enjoyable watch.
It's an enjoyable watch, and it tells a good story. And I've been saying the same thing over and over again, just like the movie does sometimes, but we've been building up to, yeah, that's it. I got it done.
But thank you for watching and listening. Until next time, I'm Hayden.
And I'm Frankie. So hopefully we'll have this out soon, and you'll be
Also seeing our regular episodes. If you like what you heard here, we do our regular podcast where we go through about a batch of 4 episodes at a time, analyzing and scrutinizing and over-enthusing about Transformers media. So join us there on our regular podcast.
Yes.
All right. Have a good one. Transform and roll out.